The Crown's closure seal waited against the doors of the Ashen Lantern Theatre, while Rosaline Fenne's final fire puppet was still burning. No audience had seen the unfinished play. No audience had heard its last scene. Theatre censor Sethran Dole faced bakers, laundresses, wounded soldiers, and widows gathered for their own history. By provisional Crown order, this theatre is closed pending a sedition hearing on whether its scheduled play portrays Prince Lucen Solgard's death as an act of royal conspiracy. A clerk read the limits. The hearing must begin within 24 hours. The actors' licenses would remain suspended only until then. Any extension required an independent court order. Nothing inside could be dismantled, reheated, or removed before review. Rosaline held the unfinished script against her mourning dress. You cannot charge a scene that has never been performed. We reviewed enough of it, Sethran said. You reviewed 3 copied pages without the final act. 3 pages are enough to show a dead prince being used against his brother's throne. Dragon King Evren Solgard stood beside him in black. War had sharpened the face Rosaline once knew, but not enough to make it unfamiliar. Use the sealed review clause, she said. Read the final act behind these doors before you let 3 copied pages condemn 12 households. The clause allowed Evren to examine the complete script before closure, with an independent court reader, a company representative, and a censor witness. Sethran answered first. Any royal review before the remembrance banquet will be treated as formal consideration of the accusation. The court will ask why the king delayed his brother's memorial to examine a conspiracy written by a woman whose judgment he once trusted personally. Rosaline kept her eyes on Evren. I ask the man who once trusted my work to look at it before destroying it. The commission is disputed, Evren said. The commission letter is sealed inside the script box. Read it with the play under independent witness. Behind the doors, the stage brazier burned low. The Ember Shadow stage preserved movements deliberately burned into its copper memory rods during witnessed rehearsal, blocking, gestures, route marker positions, prop movements, and final composition. It could replay what actors had staged. It could not determine whether the scene was true. The final movement had been rehearsed and stored under witness. No public release queue had opened it to an audience. Rosaline heard the active rods ticking through the wood. Do not strike a crown seal while they still hold witnessed heat. You will not silence the final act. You will send it into the royal memorial fire. Sethran glanced toward the waiting seal. The evidence flame discharges into a controlled royal chamber. Whatever the rods contain can be contained and examined without a street audience. The banquet hall is already lit. Royal firekeepers can extinguish a contaminated sequence. He had seen only the copied pages. He did not know what the final act contained. Licensed memory stages were registered to a royal evidence flame kindled from crown dragonfire and carried through copper conduits. When a seizure seal was struck against a licensed theatre, while its stage held witnessed heat, every unreleased sequence was forced into evidence discharge before the mechanism could be altered. The heat traveled to the nearest lit crown memorial fire. Tonight, that fire burned inside Prince Lucen's banquet hall. Can the rods be banked safely? Evren asked. Yes. Give my stagekeeper 10 minutes beneath witness. Sethran lowered his voice. 10 minutes will be described as time granted to alter evidence. Immediate discharge through the Crown network is safer. The sealed review protects the evidence without releasing it, Rosaline said. You have that choice. Evren looked from the active brazier to the palace towers prepared for his brother's memorial. Reviewing the play might be called royal consideration of conspiracy. Immediate seizure would send the final act into a guarded hall he believed his keepers could control. He placed his hand over the decree. Seal the theatre, preserve the script, and stage for the hearing. Rosaline locked the complete script inside the company's iron box. She kept the company key beneath her seal. An independent court witness added a second seal. The stage would remain inside. No copper rod could be removed or reheated, and Sethran would not hold sole custody. The order protected the evidence while closing the theatre, suspending the livelihoods of 12 theatre households, and treating 3 copied pages as sufficient reason to silence the woman who had preserved the city's common dead. Years before Rosaline married, before war placed a crown within Evren's reach, he had read every scene in the theatre's back room. He had kissed soot from her wrist and promised that no throne would make him fear an honest story. Now the black crown clasp rested beneath the hand she had asked to open her script. Move away from the door, he said. You know what this theatre keeps. I know what public grief can become, and I know what royal grief is allowed to erase. The workers lowered their tools. The fire puppet burned smaller behind the glass. You closed my theatre to protect royal dignity from words you have not read, Rosaline said. I closed it to prevent an accusation from becoming public judgment before it is tested. No. You let the accusation against me become judgment first. Evren struck the waiting crown's seal against the theatre doors. The brazier inside went dark, as witnessed heat left the copper rods. At sunset, he entered Prince Lucen's remembrance banquet. Every candle along the dining wall bent toward the same point. Fire crossed the stone without scorching it. Prince Lucen's shadow appeared at the western evacuation gate. Above him, a second figure changed the route marker. The face remained blank. The figure wore the narrow, formal sleeves used by the royal censor's office. Evren ordered the banquet doors closed before the first guest could carry the fire image into the streets. Royal guards sealed the exits. The candles had straightened, but a low ember glow remained on the western wall. Witnesses were moved into separate rooms before they could compare accounts. The image proves only that Rosaline Fenne rehearsed an accusation, Sethran Dole said beside the memorial table. It proves less than that, Rosaline answered from the doorway. She had been brought from the Ashen Lantern Theatre, under court escort, as the registered keeper of the Ember Shadow stage, not as a restored performer. The stage proves a sequence was rehearsed and stored before the seizure seal, she said. It does not prove the route marker was historically changed, that Prince Lucen saw it happen, or that the figure belonged to any named person. At least the widow admits her fire cannot testify. My fire remembers blocking. People must still prove history. The chief royal firekeeper examined the memorial brazier, copper inlet, and discharge ash. The sequence entered through the crown evidence line, he said. The theatre seal triggered it. The receiving flame was active, so the memory opened before we could bank it. Evren looked toward Rosaline. Could you have directed it here, after the theatre was sealed? No, the keeper said. The network carried it to the nearest lit memorial flame registered to the theatre. You warned us accurately, Evren said. I warned you before you chose the seal. The banquet guests were questioned separately. Their statements agreed on the movement. Lucen, at the western evacuation gate, a second figure shifting the route marker, narrow, formal sleeves used by the royal censor's office, and no visible face. Their agreement established what the palace fire displayed. It did not make the scene true. Before midnight, the first session of the sedition hearing began with evidence authentication. The complete script box arrived under the company seal and independent court seal. Both were intact. Rosaline placed her key on the table. Record every binding thread, page number, and packet seal before opening. You dictate procedure inside the palace? Sethran asked. I preserve disputed work from the office that accused it after reading 3 pages. Evren nodded to the court reader. Record it. Inside lay the complete script, rehearsal cue sheets, a Western Gate production packet, the copper rod sequence index, and a sealed private letter. The sequence index bore the workshop mark of Tavern Fenne, Rosaline's late husband, and the engineer who had rebuilt the Ember Shadow stage after the border fires. He had designed its copper rod timing system before dying in the workshop blaze 2 years earlier. The outer fold carried a theatre intake date 7 weeks before Tavern's death. Prince Lucen vanished at the Western Gate 18 months later. Rosaline had received the production packet while Lucen lived. She staged its route diagrams and movement instructions but never opened the inner letter. Its seal ordered preservation until the final act was challenged or Lucen failed to return. The court reader compared the script with the banquet statements. The final act matched the palace display. The production packet showed the Western Gate, both route marker positions, the official's hand movement, and the narrow censor office sleeves. It gave no personal name. Why leave the face unlit? Evren asked. The route packet identified the office uniform and the hand that moved the marker, Rosaline said. It gave no face and no personal name. I would not invent an identity the source did not provide. Sethran studied the copied diagram. Gate plans are public. Censor livery can be reproduced. The packet may have been created to direct suspicion toward my office. It may have been. Its paper, marks, custody, and handwriting require independent testing. The copper rod index contained a term Evren did not recognize. Western Gate Shadow, he read. Rosaline looked toward Tavern's workshop mark. A second heat layer, stored beneath the visible rehearsal sequence. It remains unreadable until a designated final cue releases it through the emberglass. Was one stored in this production? Cethron asked. The index must be examined before anyone can answer that. So concealment may have been part of the performance. Concealment is a method. It does not tell you whether hidden material is true, false, or unfinished. The court reader inspected the private letter. Its wax was consistent with Lucen's household flame seal, but the authentication notch required for a prince's formal commission was missing. He opened it beneath joint witness. If I do not return from the western evacuation gate, the final act must be performed exactly as rehearsed. Do not release it before then. The name Rosaline Solgard appeared below. It resembles his private hand, the royal archivist said. Without the notch, I cannot certify it. Wax, paper, handwriting, and custody must all be compared. It could have been copied after his death, Cethron said. His name could have been used to protect sedition. It could, Rosaline replied. Evren held hergaze. You had this when you asked me to read the script. I had the sealed packet, and I chose not to open it. You chose the version of control that required no knowledge. He made no apology. The theater remained closed. Under the license seizure statute, the Crown Preservation Fund assumed minimum stipends for the 12 theater households. Their licenses remained suspended. Evren barred the censor's office from sole custody of the handwriting, wax, and correspondence comparison. A royal archivist, an independent court examiner, and a theater representative would witness each test. Then the court reader turned over the letter. Rosaline's hand closed around the table's edge. Beneath Lucen's apparent name, a tighter hand had written, Ask Tavin Fenne how long the Western Gate shadow can remain hidden before the final cue. The theater intake mark dated the packet 7 weeks before Tavin's workshop death. Rosaline had never seen the note. The court examiner stopped Rosaline before she could touch the letter and ordered the handwriting on its 2 sides tested separately. The front carried the conditional performance instruction and Prince Lucen Solgard's apparent name. The back held the tighter note concerning the Western Gate shadow. If both were written at different times, they may not share an author, the examiner said. Cethron Dole remained at the council table. Or one hand changed under pressure. Difference is not proof of a second writer. No, Rosaline said, and resemblance is not certification. The royal archivist brought 6 private letters received from Lucen before his disappearance. Their paper, ink, line pressure, and household flame wax were compared under joint witness. The disputed front resembled Lucen's hand in its long downward strokes, narrow spacing, and pressure at the ends of sentences. 2 letter forms differed. The wax was consistent with a Solgard household source, but the missing authentication notch still prevented certification as a royal commission. The back note produced a narrower finding. The ink oxidized less than the commission text, the examiner said. It was added later. She angled the outer fold beneath a clear ember lamp. The final downstroke passes beneath the theater intake flame stamp. The notes therefore existed before the packet entered Ashen Lantern custody. The dated intake mark fixed the order without identifying the writer. Evren looked toward Rosaline. Could Tavin have written it? My husband wrote workshop notes in compressed blocks. This is narrower than his usual hand. Usual is not impossible, Cethron said. No, it means you test before you name him. The examiner entered 3 possibilities. Lucen may have added the note after writing the front. Tavin may have written the technical instruction. Another person may have added it before theater intake. None could yet be excluded. The court turned to the copper rod sequence index. Rosaline stood beside the sealed diagram table, while the 3 appointed examiners took separate positions. The royal furnace engineer would map heat, age, depth, and copper stability. The independent memory stage mechanic would read sequence spacing and release architecture. The Ashen Lantern representative would compare the rods with the original workshop index. No finding would be entered without all 3 signatures. A shadow layer is not a ghost scene, Rosaline said. The visible rehearsal occupies the upper heat line. A concealed sequence rests beneath it and remains unreadable until a coded cue releases it through the ember glass. Why hide one performance inside another? Evren asked. To protect unfinished work, preserve a dangerous source, or prevent premature seizure, or manufacture surprise, Cethron said. Yes, the method does not establish motive. Rosaline indicated the cue column. The cue is only a key. It does not create, describe, or authenticate whatever the lower layer contains. Improper release could destroy both sequences, reheating the wrong rod, forcing the Q, or removing the copper spine before mapping its temperature could flatten the layers into one useless flare. Who can examine it without opening it? Evren asked. These three can determine whether unused heat depth exists. No one should attempt release until the Q and safety order are confirmed. Then no one attempts it. Cethron folded his hands. The theater remains under the provisional closure order pending the sedition hearing. Rosaline's profession should not be allowed to authenticate a mechanism built by her husband. Nor will your office control the examination, Evren said. Each discipline will answer only for what it can test. The theater remained closed. The actors' licenses remained suspended. Under the license seizure statute, the Crown Preservation Fund continued the minimum stipends owed to the 12 theater households. Rosaline did not thank him. The workshop logs arrived from the Ashen Lantern under intact joint seals. Tavern had designed the concealed layer system, but he had not held sole access. A senior rod tender calibrated copper channels. A glass worker fitted the emberglass screen. A licensed firekeeper tested the release flame. Rosaline supervised the production. 4 access paths, Cethron said. 4 partial access paths, Rosaline replied. No one could complete a concealed layer without both the sequence index and the Q architecture. And you had both. I had production access. That does not prove I wrote the hidden content, chose its source, or added the note. The same facts support planned manipulation, Cethron said. They support more than one explanation until the rods are examined, Evren replied. Rosaline looked at him. You are learning to delay judgment after making it public. I cannot undo the order by pretending the questions are simple. No, you can only stop using uncertainty against the person who warned you. Before dawn, the examiners entered the Ashen Lantern Theater. The closure seals were intact. No copper rod had been removed or reheated. They mapped the visible Western Gate sequence first. It matched the final act and the palace discharge. Lucen approaching the gate, the route marker moving, and a faceless figure in censor office sleeves withdrawing. Beneath the upper heat line, the memory stage mechanic found a second sequence. It was faint, continuous, and deliberately isolated from the visible rehearsal. A hidden layer exists, she said. We have not opened it. Cethron requested that the record describe the finding as premeditated concealment. Record the existence, Rosaline said. Do not write motive into copper. The Q register contained no spoken line, drumbeat, or actor movement corresponding to the lower layer. Its release architecture used sound intervals converted into heat spacing. The workshop alarm was not a sound created by the fatal blaze. 6 months before Tavern's death, he had registered its 5-beat evacuation rhythm as an approved emergency theater cue. The entry bore his workshop mark and the countersigns of the rod tender and licensed firekeeper. The cue predates the fire, the furnace engineer said, and it tells us nothing about the concealed scene, Rosaline replied. The Western Gate shadow used that registered 5-beat pattern. Rosaline's hand went still against the witness rail. Every Ashen Lantern worker knew the rhythm. It was the same alarm that had sounded from Tavern's workshop on the night he died. The outer judge forbade anyone from sounding the 5-beat cue until the workshop alarm records and the lower layer's safety map had been examined together. The concealed Western Gate sequence remained sealed inside the copper memory rods. No flame was permitted near its release channel. The 3 engineers mapped the visible layer, lower heat depth, and emberglass response without opening either sequence. If the cue is sounded now, what happens? Evren asked. The Royal Furnace engineer traced the copper spacing. The rhythm is only the release code. The concealed layer can rise only when 3 conditions exist together. The receiver is armed, the rods remain above release heat, and the emberglass channel stands open. And if the stage is banked, the outer judge asked, the alarm may sound without touching the stored sequence. The company banking register showed that the main stage had been cooled, its receiver disarmed, and its emberglass channel closed before the workshop's evening calibration began. If Tavern's layer release safety order was followed, the engineer continued, the lower sequence should rise alone once the receiver is armed and the channel opened. If the rods were altered later, release could merge both sequences or burn the concealed line away. Cethron Dole stood nearby. Then the hidden layer cannot be treated as evidence of historical content until it is opened. It can be treated as an existing concealed sequence, Rosaline said, not as proof of its content. And the 5-beat rhythm? A release key. It does not describe, create, or authenticate whatever lies beneath the visible scene. The cue register was compared with Taven's workshop books. 6 months before his death, he had registered the 5-beat evacuation rhythm as an emergency cue for memory layers threatened by fire, seizure, or structural collapse. The entry carried Taven's workshop seal and 2 countersigns. The registration is genuine, the independent mechanic said. It predates the fire. Cethran inclined his head, which makes Taven the likely architect of the concealment. Taven designed the method, Rosaline replied. That does not establish who stored this sequence, what source it used, or why the alarm was chosen. A carpenter may build a locked cabinet without writing every letter later placed inside it. The outer judge ordered the workshop fire records opened before any cue test proceeded. The Ashen Lantern alarm had 2 lawful triggers. Heat sensors beneath the floor could sound it automatically when the workshop crossed the danger threshold. A manual pull beside either exit could produce the same 5-beat rhythm before the sensors reacted. Who could reach the pulls? Evren asked. Anyone inside the workshop, or anyone entering with a theater service key. The access register named theater staff and 2 maintenance officers assigned through the Royal Theater Office. The fatal night fire log remained beneath the City Furnace Court's original seal. The inquiry had closed after finding lamp oil ignition and structural collapse. No criminal conclusion had been entered. Evren read the ruling. The fire was declared accidental because no accelerant was found and the rear door warped shut. The ruling did not examine why the alarm sounded when it did, Rosaline said. Did you ask them to? I asked whether Taven could have reached the rear exit. They told me grief was making me search for intention inside an accident. Evren's hand stayed on the report, and I allowed the file to close. You were at war. That explains absence. It does not explain leaving your questions unanswered afterward. You returned wearing a crown. By then, a widow asking about a workshop fire was easier to dismiss than a king reopening his own theater office. He did not answer. The surviving workers were questioned separately. The former rod tender remembered hearing the 5-beat alarm before she smelled smoke. How long before? The outer judge asked. Perhaps 2 minutes, perhaps 3. Could heat beneath the floor have triggered it before visible smoke? Yes, the furnace engineer said. That is why memory alone cannot establish manual activation. The glassworker remembered the workshop door already locked when the alarm began. Locked from which side? Evren asked. I do not know. The corridor latch would not move. Taven locked the room during delicate calibration, she added. But he posted a red lamp outside. There was no lamp that night. Cethran raised one hand. 2-year-old memories of smoke and fear should not be treated as exact timing. They will not be, the outer judge said. They establish questions for the physical record. A maintenance officer remembered the manual alarm cord extended from its brass sleeve after the fire. Was that entered in the original report? Rosaline asked. No. The inspector said collapse may have pulled it. The furnace engineer examined the mechanism sketch. Collapse might bend the sleeve. It would not normally draw the cord 3 inches while leaving the knot intact. Normally is not certainty, Cethran said. But it is why the inquiry should not have ended with one convenient cause, Rosaline replied. Evren requested that the fire inquiry be reopened and surrendered the Crown Theatre records to independent custody. The outer judge granted the request. A city furnace court representative, an outside theatre mechanic, and a representative chosen by Taven's surviving crew would examine the retained logs, service keys, alarm components, and scene sketches. The censor's office could attend and challenge findings but could not control custody. The theatre remains closed pending the sedition hearing, Cethran said. And the licenses remain suspended, Evren replied. The Preservation Fund continues the minimum household stipends required by law. Rosaline's face did not soften. You are finally protecting evidence you once refused to hear. Do not mistake that for protecting us. I do not. The outer judge returned to the sealed timing drum. The furnace engineer inspected its reset wheel, maintenance notch, and sealing pin. None showed movement after the drum had been wound for the fatal night shift. The outer wax remained unbroken. The automatic heat sensors recorded their first threshold crossing at 11 minutes past the second evening bell. The 5-beat alarm registered at 8 minutes past the bell. Clock drift? Cethran asked. Both entries came from the same drum, the engineer said. The automatic channel cannot mark before the heat threshold that activates it. The concealed western gate layer remains sealed. The timing drum proved only that the workshop alarm had not begun with the automatic heat sensors. Someone had activated a manual pull 3 minutes before the recorded blaze became hot enough to sound the alarm on its own. The outer judge ordered the 2 workshop alarm pulls examined separately before either exit was treated as a route of escape. The concealed western gate layer remained sealed. Its receiver stayed disarmed, the emberglass channel closed, and the 5-beat cue was not sounded. The surviving alarm frame had been removed from the Ashen Lantern workshop after the fire and stored by the city furnace court. Both manual pulls fed the same timing drum, but each left a different channel mark. The front pull enters through the straight notch, the outside theater mechanic said. The rear pull crosses the lower wheel and leaves a hooked return. The fatal night alarm mark carried the hooked return. The rear channel, the outer judge said. Sethran Dole stood at the council rail. That identifies a mechanism, not a person. A worker may have pulled it as an ordinary warning. Yes, Rosaline said. Warning remains possible. The rear pull had been mounted inside the workshop beside the emergency bar. It could not be reached from the corridor without opening the door. The front pull stood near the main entrance and could be reached by anyone already inside. Could the rear cord be drawn from outside with a tool? Evren asked. Not without leaving damage on the sleeve or wall plate, the mechanic replied. The service key register was open next. 7 keys could enter the workshop corridor. Only 4 could open the calibration room itself. Tavin's personal key, Rosaline's company key, the senior rod tender's key, and 1 Crown Theatre maintenance key held under office issue. Rosaline's key had been logged at the front ticket room that evening while she supervised costume repairs. 4 workers had signed beside the entry. The rod tender's key had been surrendered at dusk. Tavin's key was found inside the workshop after the fire. The Crown maintenance key had been signed out that afternoon for chimney inspection. Returned when? Rosaline asked. The keeper turned the page. Not until the following morning. Who held it overnight? The borrower line carried an office number, not a personal name. Sethran answered before the keeper could. Crown maintenance crews sometimes rotate a key between licensed workers. The office number preserves accountability when shifts change. Which workers changed shifts that night? The outer judge asked. The assignment sheet listed 2 maintenance officers. One had inspected the upper chimney before sunset. The second was recorded at a palace lantern house during the first evening bell. Neither assignment placed a worker at the Ashen Lantern during the fatal hour. That leaves an unrecorded transfer or a false assignment, Rosaline said. Or an incomplete sheet, Sethran replied. The records are 2 years old. The outer judge entered all 3 possibilities. The red calibration lamp procedure was then read into the hearing. Whenever Tavern locked the workshop for delicate rod work, a red glass lamp had to burn outside the door. It warned staff not to enter and required the latch time to be recorded. No red lamp entry appeared on the fatal night sheet. The lamp itself had been found cold and unlit on its hook. Tavern sometimes forgot the record, Sethran said. Not the lamp, the former rod tender replied. He said locked fire without warning was how people died. The outer judge did not treat her loyalty as proof. He asked for the 6 months of lamp sheets preceding the blaze. Every recorded locked calibration included a red lamp mark. The fatal night did not. The rear emergency bar had also been examined after the fire. The original scene sketch showed it bent inward, while the outer latch plate remained set in the closed position. What does that establish? Evren asked. The mechanic studied the copy. That the door was under pressure when heat distorted it. It does not tell us whether the pressure came from a person, falling timber, or expansion. Could Tavern have opened it before the distortion? If he reached it before the frame shifted? The original inspector was summoned. He admitted that the extended alarm cord and missing red lamp had not appeared in his final report. Why? The outer judge asked. The fire source looked ordinary. Lamp oil had spread near the calibration bench. The door damage matched heat collapse. Did you compare the alarm time with the sensor threshold? No. Did you test which manual channel marked the drum? No. Why not? The inspector looked toward Rosaline. The Crown Theatre office urged a prompt, accidental ruling so household stipends and burial compensation could be released. Sethran's voice stayed measured. Prompt compensation is not evidence of interference. No, Rosaline said. But urgency decided which questions a widow was allowed to ask. Evren requested the complete correspondence between the Crown Theatre Office, Furnace Court, and Compensation Board. He waived royal administrative privilege over those records and placed them under the outer judge's custody. Sethron turned toward him. Those files include protected procedures for every licensed theatre in the capital. Separate, unrelated material, Evren said. Preserve everything touching this fire, its key issue, and its closure. You are exposing Crown operations on the strength of an incomplete alarm finding. I closed Rosaline's theatre on 3 copied pages. I will not now call a sealed timing drum insufficient because the record embarrasses my offices. Rosaline looked at him across the hearing table. That is accountability for this decision. It does not restore the decisions you denied me 2 years ago. I know. The theatre remained closed. The actors' licenses remained suspended. The hidden layer was not opened. Near midnight, the independent mechanic compared the fatal alarm mark against controlled tests from both surviving pull designs. The hooked return matched the rear exit channel. The rear pull could be reached only from inside the locked workshop. Then the City Furnace Court produced the original scene sketch showing where Tavern had been found. His body had lain beside the calibration bench. The rear alarm pull was across the room, beyond the fallen emberglass frame. The record did not prove another person had been present. It proved only that the alarm had been pulled from a place the original inquiry never explained how Tavern reached. The outer judge refused to treat Tavern's distance from the rear alarm pull as proof that another person had been inside the workshop. He ordered the fallen emberglass frame reconstructed from the original scene sketches. Heat distortion showed the frame fell between the calibration bench and rear exit after the manual alarm was pulled. That means Tavern could have crossed the room before it fell, Sethron said. It means he could have, Rosaline replied. It does not prove he did. The recovered Crown maintenance key remained under seal. No record placed a named holder at the Ashen Lantern during the fatal hour. The fire inquiry had reached another limit. The hidden Western Gate layer had not. After the engineers completed the safety map, the outer judge authorized a controlled release. The visible sequence would remain banked. The receiver would be armed only for the lower heat line, and the emberglass channel would open for one passage. If the rods begin to merge? Evren asked. We close the channel before the second interval, the furnace engineer said. The concealed layer may be lost, but the visible memory should survive. Rosaline stood behind the company witness line. No one sounds the cue until all 3 examiners confirm the receiver. Sethron looked toward the court. She is still directing a mechanism built by her husband. I am preventing the same court that ignored his fire from destroying what remains. The 3 examiners signed. The 5-beat rhythm sounded once. Heat rose beneath the visible Western Gate scene without touching it. The emberglass darkened, then opened a second field of shadow. The hidden sequence did not show Tavern's fire. It showed the Ashen Lantern workshop months earlier. A man in a prince's short mantle stood beside a scale model of the Western Palace passages. His face was unlit. The mantle clasp carried the divided Solgard flame used by royal sons. Across from him, an engineer's figure adjusted the miniature route marker and pointed toward the ash stair. The stage preserved blocking, gestures, and propositions, not identity or truth. The prince-shaped figure placed a sealed packet beside the model and pointed to the open river passage, then the ash stair, then a funeral lantern. The engineer covered the model with black cloth. The sequence ended. The outer judge ordered the emberglass banked. A staged warning, Sethron said. It proves only that someone wanted an audience to believe a prince feared the western route. Yes, Rosaline said. Evren looked toward her. You agree? I have agreed from the beginning that performance is not history. The court reader reopened the production packet. Beneath the route diagram lay 3 timing notations previously treated as rehearsal marks. The independent examiner compared them with palace evacuation schedules from the month before Lucen vanished. Each matched a planned route test. The first 2 sent royal parties through the open river passage. The third redirected Lucen's assigned escort through the ash stair. Who approved the change? Evren asked. The schedule carried an administrative route stamp from the Royal Censor's office, which supervised memorial crowds and emergency passage clearance. It carried no personal signature. My office reviewed public route safety, Sethron said. Hundreds of changes passed through that stamp. Was the ash stair safe? The outer judge asked. For ordinary evacuation? For a royal party? Cethron paused, only with the western gate unlocked. The gate log showed that the western gate had been ordered locked during the final route test. That order came from a separate security office. No evidence established that either office knew what the other had done. Rosaline studied the route sheet. A line in Lucen's apparent hand appeared beside the third test. If the river passage is replaced and the western gate is closed, the ash stair becomes a sealed descent. The handwriting remained uncertified, but the ink predated theater intake. Below it appeared, "Prepare the final act. Release it only if I do not return." Evren's hand tightened against the evidence rail. He knew the route could trap him. He believed it could, Rosaline said. That does not prove who arranged it. The outer judge entered the finding narrowly. Before Lucen vanished, someone using his apparent private hand delivered route materials to the Ashen Lantern and commissioned a conditional final act, depicting a change from the river passage to the ash stair. The record showed that the route change and gate closure would create dangerous confinement. They did not prove coordination, intent to kill, or a named author. Evren looked at Rosaline across the darkened ember glass. "You asked me to read this before I closed your theater." "Yes, and I protected the dignity of a dead brother by refusing the warning he may have left. You protected the story that required the least courage from you." Then the examiner lifted the final folded sheet from the production packet. It was a cast and crew protection list written before Lucen disappeared. Every name had been crossed out in censor's red ink. The crossed names did not prove who had threatened the Ashen Lantern Company. They proved that someone had reviewed Lucen's protection list and marked every witness for removal before the final act could be released. The outer judge placed the sheet under independent seal. "What does red ink establish?" Cethron Dole asked. "The batch came from the censor's office," the court examiner said. "That identifies an institutional source, not the writer." Cethron inclined his head. "Then it may record routine clearance. A cast list is not evidence that every named worker possessed protected knowledge." Rosaline studied the crossings. 12 theater households lost their licenses the moment you closed our doors. Now we know their names were marked before Lucen vanished. "We know the list was marked," Cethron replied. "We do not yet know when, why, or by whose order." He was correct about the limit. Rosaline did not let the limit become permission. No worker returns to palace questioning alone. No family is moved into censor lodging. No one loses the preservation stipend for refusing an unwitnessed interview. Evren looked toward the outer judge. "Enter those protections." Cethron's expression remained calm. "Protective terms may be reasonable. Rosaline cannot dictate Crown procedure while her company remains under sedition review." "I am not dictating your procedure," she said. "I am deciding what access you have to my people." The 12 names included actors, rod tenders, the glass worker, the licensed firekeeper, and Tavern Fenne. Beside Tavern's name, the red line had been drawn twice. Rosaline closed the copied list. The company withdraws from royal patronage. Evren's head lifted. "The theater is licensed through the Crown Evidence Network. Then suspend the license permanently. The Ashen Lantern will not carry royal memorial fire while the Crown claims the right to seize our stage before reading our work. If you sever the evidence line, no stored sequence can be transmitted to a royal court. That is the point." Cethron stepped closer to the council rail. "A licensed remembrance house cannot remove itself while evidence is under review. The stage and disputed rods remain sealed," Rosaline said. "I am withdrawing future service, not disturbing present evidence." The outer judge examined the licensing charter. "A company may renounce future Crown patronage. The renunciation does not reopen the theater, restore performance rights, or release seized material. It does prevent new royal commissions from being imposed after this hearing." "Enter it," Rosaline said. Evren watched the clerk record the withdrawal. Years earlier, before she married Tavern, he had once asked Rosaline to build a court theater beside the palace. She had refused because ordinary people would never enter it without invitation. Now he said, "The Crown can grant the Ashen Lantern an independent charter. The Crown closed us yesterday. I am offering protection from the office that did it. You are offering another form of dependence before you have repaired the first." He stopped. "What do you require?" "Nothing from you tonight." The answer struck harder because it contained no performance. Rosaline turned to the company workers behind the witness rail. We will move our families out of Crown lodging. The Preservation Fund may pay what the statute requires, but no royal steward will decide where we sleep or whom we speak to. The outer judge granted temporary safe conduct to the Old River Rehearsal House, a property held by the company guild rather than the palace. The 12 households could relocate under independent escort. Their licenses remained suspended, but their movement and testimony would not be controlled by the censor's office. Evren signed the access order surrendering palace claim over their lodging. He did not ask Rosaline to stay. The Ashen Lantern went dark that evening. Without its licensed stage, the palace lost more than one forbidden play. The theatre had maintained remembrance sequences for dock fires, border evacuations, market riots, and the names of workers omitted from royal chronicles. Those performances could no longer be summoned through Crown Memorial Flame. At the next public remembrance, the palace walls showed only official banners. No baker's widow spoke from fire. No wounded porter's route appeared beside the general's victory. The silence was orderly. It was also obvious. Crowds gathered outside the sealed theatre and left lanterns beneath Rosaline's name. Cethron called the display pressure upon an active court. Evren refused to have the lanterns removed. Public grief is not sedition because it embarrasses the crown. Rosaline heard of the order from a company runner. She did not return. At the River Rehearsal House, she divided the workers into separate witness groups and copied every threat, transfer notice, and unexplained inspection from the months before Lucen vanished. One document had been delivered to Tavind 3 days before the workshop fire. It ordered him to surrender the Western Gate rod index for routine censor preservation. Tavind had written across the bottom, refused. Index remains with company until every named worker receives safe conduct. Below his refusal, someone had added a later instruction in red, obtain before the final cue. The red instruction beneath Tavind's refusal was entered into the sedition hearing under independent seal. Its ink matched the censor office batch used during the month before the workshop fire. The handwriting belonged to no person yet identified. Obtain before the final cue, the outer judge read. That establishes an effort to recover the rod index. It does not establish who wrote the order, why it was sought, or whether the effort caused the fire. Cethron Dole remained at the council rail. My office had lawful authority to preserve performance mechanisms tied to royal history. Not without a seizure order, Rosaline said. The request may have been preliminary. Tavind refused it as a demand. The judge compared the page with the censor registry. No formal preservation order had been issued. No independent witness had been assigned. The instruction had traveled outside the procedure Cethron now claimed it represented. Evren rose before the public gallery. I closed the Ashen Lantern Theatre, after reading none of the complete play. Cethron turned toward him. Majesty, the inquiry has not authenticated the commission letter or established the historical truth of the final act. No, Evren said, but it has established that I had a sealed review option, refused it, and allowed 3 copied pages to become judgment against 12 theatre households. Rosaline watched him place the closure decree on the evidence table. I withdraw the Crown's request to continue provisional closure. The outer judge reviewed the original order, the intact rods, and the company's compliance. No evidence showed that Rosaline had altered the stage after seizure, directed the palace discharge, or violated the preservation terms. The judge lifted the closure. The actors' licenses were restored by the court, not by royal pardon. The Crown Preservation Fund remained responsible for lost statutory wages until the Ashen Lantern could lawfully perform again. Rosaline did not move toward the theatre keys. The doors may open, Evren said. Under which master? None. I will support an independent charter. You will support it. You will not write it. No. And the Crown evidence line? Yours to refuse. Cethron objected. A memory theatre carrying royal murder material cannot remove itself from Crown oversight. The disputed rods remain under court seal, the outer judge said. Future performances are a separate licensing matter. Rosaline faced Evren. You closed us with one signature. Do not expect reopening to feel like rescue. I do not. He ordered the palace route archives, Western Gate schedules, and Prince Lucen's sealed correspondence opened under divided custody. He waived royal privilege over every record touching the final route test, even where disclosure could expose failures by his own guard and memorial offices. Cethron's voice stayed calm. Those archives contain evacuation weaknesses still used by the palace. Then unrelated routes will be redacted by the court, Evren said. The Western Gate record will not remain hidden because its release embarrasses the Crown. He also barred the censor's office from private interviews with the theatre workers. Every questioning required a worker advocate and an independent recorder. The safe conduct Rosaline demanded became binding for the 12 households and their families. "You are giving suspects control over access," Sethron said. "I am preventing an implicated office from controlling people it previously marked for removal. Implicated is not guilty. No, that is why you remain here with counsel instead of under sentence." The answer cost Evren support. 2 memorial ministers resigned before dusk. A senior guardhouse refused to endorse the archive release. The palace announced that the remembrance season would continue without official performances. At the River Rehearsal House, Rosaline read the independent charter draft aloud to the company. It gave the workers shared ownership of the stage, required dual custody for memory rods, and prohibited royal seizure without a complete script review unless immediate fire danger existed. Evren had surrendered appointment power over the charter board. Rosaline found him waiting outside after the reading. "You wrote none of it?" she asked. "The company advocate and outer judge did." "That was wise. I am learning where my authority should end. You are learning after using it where it should never have begun." He accepted the line. "I loved your work before I loved the woman who made it." Her hand tightened on the charter. "That did not stop you from treating both as dangerous when the court looked at you." "No." The river wind moved soot-dark hair across her cheek. He did not reach to move it. "I will continue opening the records whether you perform again or not," he said. "That is repair. Do not turn it into courtship." "I will not." The first Western Gate archive box arrived that night. Inside lay route diagrams, guard schedules, and inspection receipts from the week Lucen vanished. One page recorded a senior censor inspection 18 minutes before the route marker was changed. The inspector had signed with his full name, Sethrandol. The outer judge sealed Sethrandol's signed inspection page before anyone could call it a confession. The record placed him at the Western Gate 18 minutes before the route marker changed. It did not show why he was there, whether he touched the mechanism, or whether he remained after signing. "I inspected the crowd corridor and emergency lamps," Sethron said. "The route mechanism belonged to palace security." Rosaline Fenne studied the page through the evidence glass. "Then the next records must show when you left, if they exist." The outer judge agreed. Sethron's signature established presence, not responsibility. The Western Gate's shadow layer remained under divided custody. Although the court had viewed it once under controlled conditions, no public performance could occur without the Ashen Lantern Company key, 3 engineering signatures, and Rosaline's authorization as company keeper. Evren asked whether she would permit the final act to be shown at the resumed sedition hearing. Not while the workers named in Lucen's packet can still be questioned, displaced, or stripped of work by the office their names were marked beneath. Sethron turned toward her. "You are withholding relevant evidence to bargain for institutional power. The court already possesses the rods and technical report. I am withholding my company's labor from a public spectacle until every threatened household is protected. The public has an interest in seeing what was staged. The public does not own the people required to stage it." Rosaline placed the independent charter draft before the outer judge. It required shared worker ownership of the Ember Shadow stage, divided custody of every copper memory rod, complete script review before seizure, and independent approval before Crown Fire could enter the theatre. She added a second document. Every person on Lucen's protection list would receive binding safe conduct, legal representation during questioning, protection from license retaliation, and relocation support chosen by the household. "No final public cue until both orders are enforceable," she said. Sethron's voice remained controlled. "You cannot make protection from lawful questioning a condition of evidence release. I have not. They may be questioned under witness. They may not disappear into private rooms controlled by the office whose ink crossed out their names." Evren looked at the charter's final page. "The throne will hold no board seat. No, and future kings cannot reconnect the evidence flame by decree. Not without the company's vote and an independent court order." He signed the crowned surrender of those powers. Rosaline watched the ink dry without thanking him. The outer judge ratified the charter provisionally and entered the worker protections as binding orders. Violation would suspend the responsible office from the hearing and trigger independent custody of its records. Only then did Rosaline place the company key beside the sealed performance register. "This allows preparation," she said. "It does not authorize release until the protections are confirmed in practice. Evren Solgard. You decide when." "The company decides. I carry its vote." He accepted the correction. By afternoon, the 12 theatre households had chosen their own advocates and lodging. No royal steward selected their rooms. No censor questioned them alone. The first protected witness came forward before sunset. One name on Lucen's list belonged to a former Western Gate route clerk who had helped Tavin construct the scale model used in the final act. After Lucen vanished, the clerk had been dismissed for copying an inspection schedule and had lived outside the capital under a shortened surname. He testified behind a plain ember screen that concealed his face without altering his voice. "I recorded Censor Dole's arrival," he said. "He carried authority to inspect the memorial corridor." "Did you see him move the route marker?" the outer judge asked. "No." "Did you see him order it moved?" "No." "Then what did you witness?" "The river passage marker was mounted when he entered." He asked who held the mechanism key. Cethran spoke for himself. "A standard safety question. It may have been," the clerk said. Rosaline did not ask him to go beyond memory. "A palace maintenance officer brought the key," the clerk continued. "Censor Dole and the officer entered the upper mechanism room. I remained below." "How long were they inside?" "Until the second route bell." "And when they emerged?" "The officer carried nothing. Censor Dole said the western mechanism was to remain untouched until Prince Lucen's escort cleared the ash stair." "That instruction could have protected the prince from a moving gate," Cethran said. "It could," Rosaline replied, "until the route and gate orders are read together." The clerk opened the copy he had hidden for 2 years. It showed the western gate was already scheduled to remain locked through Lucen's passage. Then he placed a second note beneath Cethran's inspection receipt. "I did not see who moved the marker," he said, "but Censor Dole did not leave before it changed." He had entered the upper mechanism room carrying the replacement ash stair marker in his own hands. The outer judge refused to let Cethran Dole's possession of the replacement marker stand alone as proof. The final hearing moved to the reopened Ashen Lantern Theatre under the independent charter. The Crown evidence line remained disconnected. The Ember Shadow stage would perform only through the company's own banked flame, under divided custody and 3 engineering signatures. Every worker on Lucen's protection list sat behind guarded witness screens. Their safe conduct orders had been tested for 2 full days. No license had been threatened. No private questioning had occurred. Rosaline stood before the ember glass. "The stage will show what was rehearsed," she said. "The records and witnesses will establish what the rehearsal means. Neither can replace the other." The outer judge nodded. "Proceed." The visible western gate sequence opened first. Prince Lucen's stage shadow approached the gate. Above him, the faceless censor office figure shifted the route marker from the river passage to the ash stair. The performance stopped before the concealed lair. Cethran remained at the council rail. "You have shown the same accusation again." "No," Rosaline said. "We have shown the same choreography. Now read the records." The route clerk testified that the river marker was mounted when Cethran entered the upper mechanism room carrying the ash stair replacement. The inspection register placed Cethran inside until after the second route bell. The mechanism key ledger showed that the palace maintenance officer signed the key to Cethran's inspection authority and did not regain sole custody before the marker changed. The Western Gate order, issued separately, required the gate to remain locked during Lucen's passage. Cethran looked toward the judge. "Separate officers created those conditions. No document proves I knew the gate order." The court examiner opened the final archive sheet. It was a duplicate gate notice delivered to the censor's office before Cethran's inspection. His initials appeared beside the receipt time. He did not speak. The outer judge still did not rule. "Receipt proves access," he said, not that he read it. The former route clerk produced the note he had copied before dismissal. Cethran's own inspection hand had summarized both conditions on one line. Ash stair active. Western Gate held closed through Royal Passage. Below it, he had written, "Marker change to remain unannounced until escort enters descent." Cethran's composure thinned. That note managed crowd movement. It was not an order to kill Prince Lucen. "No witness has claimed that yet," Rosaline said. The concealed Western Gate shadow layer was then prepared. Rosaline looked toward the 12 households. "Company vote?" One by one, the The representatives raised their hands. Only after the final vote did she arm the receiver, open the emberglass channel, and authorize the 5-beat release code. The lower sequence rose beneath the visible scene. It showed the scale model in Tavin's workshop. The prince-shaped figure placed the route schedule beside the miniature gate. The engineer-shaped figure positioned the ash stair marker, then pointed to a written warning attached beneath it. A third shadow entered, wearing censor office sleeves. The face remained unlit. The third figure removed the warning, folded it, and placed it inside a narrow red document case before taking the replacement marker. The stage identified no person. The recovered censor archive did. Independent examiners matched the red case's dimensions, clasp position, and inventory notch to Sethran's assigned inspection case. The same archive contained the missing warning sheet, still folded inside it. Its text stated that a locked western gate would turn the ash stair into a sealed descent. Sethran had received the warning, removed it from the mechanism file, carried the replacement marker into the room, and ordered the change concealed until Lucen's escort entered. The outer judge convicted him of falsifying a royal evacuation route, suppressing a danger notice, unlawful evidence seizure, and obstructing the original fire inquiry. The court did not declare that he had personally intended Lucen's death. That charge required proof the hearing did not possess. But the kingdom no longer called the prince's death an unexplained accident. The Ashen Lantern's licenses were restored under its own charter. Tavin's workshop fire remained under independent investigation. His name was cleared of negligence without being turned into a convenient martyr. Evren stood before the public gallery. I closed this theater to prevent untested accusation from harming the crown. I harmed 12 households by treating accusation against them as sufficient. The closure was mine. The failure was mine. He surrendered the throne's unilateral power to close licensed memory theaters without complete script review and independent approval. When the hearing ended, he found Rosaline beneath the dark emberglass. "I will not ask you to return to the palace," he said. "Good. I will not ask you to forgive me because I finally did what justice required." Her eyes stayed on him. "What will you ask?" "Whether, one day, I may sit in the back row and listen before I speak." Rosaline looked toward the workers reopening the theater doors. "Buy a ticket like everyone else." It was not forgiveness. But when the first ordinary audience entered the Ashen Lantern, she left one seat in the back row unclaimed.